Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back to those of you who have also joined us in November for our election polling webinar, Public Support for the 2Gen Approach. I'm Sarah Haight, Director of 2Gen Practice at Ascend, and I'm really excited to welcome you to our second webinar in our Moving Forward with Families series, which is focusing on strengthening leadership and building trust to support family prosperity in our new political environment. So today, in Courageous Leadership for and with Families, we are focusing on how we can grow into more inclusive, bold, and values-led leadership in a changing political era. And before we start, I want to acknowledge that the Ascend offices are headquartered at the Aspen Institute in Washington, D.C., which is situated on and adjacent to ancestral lands of the Anacostan, Piscataway, Susquehannock, Nanticoke, and Pamunkey peoples. We also want to recognize the peoples native to our Aspen, Colorado campus, the Ute peoples. We know that land acknowledgements are just one way to honor and recognize Indigenous history, and Ascend, we strive to continuously and transparently celebrate how we all benefit from Indigenous wisdom and culture. So we encourage you to visit the website of our colleagues at the Center for Native American Youth, who are sharing important resources and background every week on how to support young Indigenous families. In transitioning to our webinar, we're looking forward to a robust conversation that we will end promptly at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. So to that end, participants will be muted throughout the session. There's a Q&A box you can add questions to throughout the webinar. We aim to have a few rounds of Q&A toward the end of the webinar, and questions that we do not get to now, we'll aim to address in a blog afterwards. We are also recording the webinar, and we will follow up with materials, including slides from the webinar. So I'm delighted to welcome our four speakers. Layla Zidane is an Ascend Fellow and CEO and President of Future Caucus. She joins us from the nation's largest bipartisan organization for millennial and Gen Z lawmakers, striving to activate young leaders to bridge the partisan divide and transform democracy at the state and federal levels. Two lawmakers from Future Caucus are also here today, both of whom are part of the caucus's Prenatal to Three working group, which focuses on the issues most relevant to young families. Representative Gregor Illigan is a Democrat in Hawaii, serving the 4th District for the state, as well as Vice Speaker for the State House. And Representative Aaron Pilkington is a Republican serving Arkansas's 45th District. They are both really squeezing this in between sessions, so we're grateful to have you both here, and they're going to share more about their impactful leadership for and with families at the state level, and really what it means to put communities first. Moderating is Ascend's founder and executive director, Ann Mosley, who also serves as a vice president at the Institute and co-chair of the Aspen Institute Forum on Women and Girls. Ann has more than 20 years of experience in philanthropy, policy, and practice, and she's a national leader in bridging sectors and ideologies to create real opportunities for prosperity and mobility for families with low incomes. Since founding Ascend in 2010, Ann has also spearheaded a focus on incubating, advancing, and implementing 2Gen solutions in counties and states, including, for example, Hawaii, where the Ohana Nui effort has transformed human services for families. So Ann, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Haight, and also to my wonderful colleagues and friends for joining me in this conversation. And I think I'm just going to open with a few kind of sort of New Year thoughts. And I'm someone who, at the end of each year, I take really seriously the chance to go quiet, to reflect, rest, and really try to recharge, but also continue to reimagine. And I share this because we started last year a series of conversations that were really trying to take a balcony perspective on leadership, values, social innovation, cohesion, community, and really intergenerational prosperity. And, it's kind of amazing to think about a year ago was in conversation with U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock, also an Ascend Fellow like Layla Zidane, as well as Jonathan Ike, who had just finished and has released his book about King, sort of King, A Life Story. And the parts that I pull in from this was how we think about what a radical curiosity, empathy, commitment look like? How do we think about leadership and service? And for all of us, at least saying, I want to join this conversation today, how we start the new year with intentionality, shared purpose, passion, and curiosity and commitment. And so, we have had over 400 leaders from more than sort of 46 states, DC, Puerto Rico, and even across the globe that want to dial in for a conversation around courageous leadership and leadership that is with and for families to really drive policy systems, innovation, impact, structures, create a world that is really for and with and by people and families at the center. I also know that we had a lot of friends and partners joining us from California and specifically the LA County. And if we want to talk about courageous leadership and coupling that with compassion and resilience, I just want to a special hug and warmth, and that's an inadequate response, but that when we look at the leadership that's happening at the community and across all sectors and how we all stand to come together, both in crisis and in trauma, as well as building anew, just want to know that Ascend and the Aspen Institute are with you. So as you go into this conversation backdrop of kind of here we are entering the new year around the corner. On Monday, we will both experience a presidential inauguration. It will also coincide with Martin Luther King Day, a day of national service, inspiration. It's also about looking forward and looking backwards. And I share that because one of my highlights is we're going to be talking about policy and innovation and partnership with communities. When I think about the political context, which is probably on everyone's mind that is in this conversation, one of my takeaways or offerings in leadership is how do we reject, I think we'll hear a little bit about this today, reject zero-sum leadership and also the game of politics that does have winners and losers to really actually reframe the conversation in service and purpose. And so this conversation with Future Caucus and also thinking about our youngest children and families and in that incredibly important period of prenatal to 3, this is an opportunity for us to think about the power of where we're coming together. So when we think about dynamic times, dynamic leadership, we are in a time of extreme change in terms of what are some of the ideas and possibilities happening in the world, happening out of Washington, as well as we also know that these are the same opportunities, challenges, and struggles we've been working on for a long time. So it's both what's new, what's not new, but how are we coming together with renewed purpose and clarity? And a few thoughts just of that as we go into the conversation from the work that we have done at Ascend and the Aspen Institute for 75 years. I really want to underscore that leadership lies in all of us, that honoring lived experience, especially of the families that we're a part of, that we serve, is such an extraordinary asset and also core leadership priority. And how we think about kind of radical humility and collaboration coming together to create a community that is truly for all, that has the best of all corners of our country, all segments of our society, and the diversity and the brilliance and imagination of our entire country. And so the 3 kind of series of conversations we've been having here at the Institute and through Ascend in these conversations was one, where do we have shared public support that actually can break through political polarization? And that was a conversation we had back in November, where 80% of voters came across, not this slide yet, I'll ask it in one sec. But 80% of voters shared that they thought if by working with children and the adults in their lives together, we would have and produce better results. And this was effective, efficient, and more equitable. And so if you can bring back the slides, I'm sorry about that. One of the parts that we were pulling out from the bipartisan polling we did with the Terrence Group and Lake Research Partners, we asked a couple questions specifically drilling down on leadership. And so you'll see on the slide here, if we want policies that work better for families, we need different kinds of leaders than we have now making these decisions. And when you look at these numbers, 80% of voters say they strongly agree. That's a pretty important message to listen to. 83% of voters who are under age 45 strongly agree. And then 78% over 45. And so if we go to the next slide real quick, we also cut this data, kind of this call for new leadership, both what families and voters and the world is calling for. When we look at through the political affiliation lens, we see that 87% of Republicans said calling for new leadership, 78% of independents, 75% of Democrats. Still, an overwhelming majority for it is time for something new. And first step in that, I think, is actually getting more rooted, more proximate, more connected to families and communities, listening to what they need, what they want, what are their ideas, versus telling or pushing upon them. So last slide here. Thanks so much. And so there was another question where we talked about if we want government-funded programs that serve families to run effectively and efficiently, we need to trust families and give them the flexibility to do what is right for them and their family. And you'll see that 73% of all voters agreed with this. 77% of those under 45. And I share this sort of looking at call for something new, trusting families, and changing not only how we lead, but how we govern. Because leadership is at the heart of policy and systems change. We so often will say, that's a system or that's a structure, but always remembering our systems and our structures are comprised of people and leaders. And it is leaders and people who make the decisions that will also affect our lives, as well as how to really listen and engage and partner with the strengths and the hopes and dreams of families. So I'm super excited to kind of broaden this conversation and really invite Layla Zidane, who is one of the most exciting and inspirational and rock star leaders out there, that is saying there is opportunity for us to be building new ways to govern, to lead, to cross generation through her work at Future Caucus. I've had the privilege of working alongside and learning from and with her and lifting up her voice and the work of her incredible community, which we'll hear from two fantastic representatives in a second, but that are defying the national narrative that we can't work together, that we can't put families at the center. And so, Layla, I'd love for you to share, just invite you to kick off what have been your insights coming out of this election season over the past couple of years, and really your leadership journey and discovery and continued growth. So, Layla.
Thank you, Anne. That was a very nice introduction. And I recognize that I am sort of the person in between you and the audience getting to hear from the amazing lawmakers who we have on the call. So I'll try to be brief. But again, my name's Layla Zidane, and I had the privilege of being an Ascend Fellow in 2022 when I was actually just a year into my leadership journey as CEO of Future Caucus. I'd been with the organization for about 5 years prior to that, but really got to sink my teeth into what could this network of young elected leaders who are all committed to working in a way that inspires trust in our institutions and that involves all of us working together on problems. What could Future Caucus build? What could we do to really help catalyze that? And so the idea for what's now called the Policy Innovation Lab was born out of really my my fellowship with Ascend. And so I'll be forever grateful to Anne and the team for sparking that. It is an incubator for good ideas. It is a convener for young Republican and young Democratic lawmakers who want to work on issues. And it helps take us out of this binary of left-right solutions and really think about future past, right? These lawmakers have run for office not because they want to shuffle papers around and do like photo ops, which I'm sure is super fun, but not the point of these jobs. It's to solve problems. And I think it's really clear when you meet them how much and how deeply these leaders really do care about the communities they represent and the communities they serve. So we recently did polling as well with Lake Research Partners And I want to share a few numbers. Some of them are like not great, and some of them I think inspire a lot of hope, and I want to talk about both of them. The first number that I'm going to share is that 50% of voters believe that we've lost our shared identity, our shared national identity, according to half of the country. And that's up from 34% about a decade ago. I think that is maybe unsurprising when you think about, right, coming out of an election where, especially in like battleground states, you're constantly bombarded with messaging and ads that reinforce this notion that people who are different from you are the enemy and they're an existential threat to your future. And so I think what Future Caucus is trying to do is really counter that narrative. And the reality is we want a lot of the same things. And so our mission is audacious, perhaps, but is to bridge the partisan, to activate young leaders to bridge the partisan divide and transform American politics. And here's why I think some of the research that we did with Lake actually gives me hope that that is not a fool's errand or not as audacious maybe as it sounds. When we talked to voters and when we polled them, again, this bipartisan poll, we found that 84% of voters prefer leaders who respect others and will collaborate across party lines. And so when we're asking people, what is the quality of leader that you're looking for, this capacity to engage across difference is overwhelmingly desired, Democrats and Republicans. And when you look at voters under 30, and so that includes 71% of men, 86% of women, they value leadership grounded in integrity and mutual respect. And so I think the name of the game is, with this rising generation of leaders, it's not prospective leaders people are thinking about, governing or doing things. They are inside the institutions right now, writing laws, making decisions, leading, changing the culture from the inside. The question is, how do we scale that? This is why I love my job. This is why I think I have the best job in the world, is because I get to work with hundreds and hundreds of lawmakers around the country who are doing that right now, not talking about it. They are walking the walk. In the past, I guess 11 years now, we've worked with more than 1,900 Gen Z and millennial lawmakers. And they want to make durable, lasting change for their states and communities. And they know that durable change means you have to build broad-based coalitions to achieve it. And once you do that, once you can prove that our institutions can deliver results, that's really the key to restoring voters' confidence in our democracy and our institutions. And you start to get that sense of shared identity back. And so these are, you're about to hear from some of the leaders who are on the front lines of actually doing that. And I think acting on some of the issues that this community I know cares really deeply, deeply about. That can sound like a tough thing in today's day and age in an era of widespread polarization. But again, I promise you, you are going to leave inspired. You're going to leave motivated. You are going to figure out how you can move to Arkansas or Hawaii to be in these people's districts because they're amazing lawmakers. And, maybe I'll just hand it over to them now, actually, to introduce themselves. Just very briefly, I'll say Representative Gregor Iligan, who's a Democrat from Hawaii, and Representative Aaron Pilkington, who's a Republican from Arkansas, were two of the founding members of our Policy Innovation Fellowship on maternal health. And we're really excited that over the next 2 years, we've expanded that focus to be prenatal to 3. They also lead tons of other efforts bringing together young Democrats and Republicans in their states. Actually, I think Rep. Pilkington is like fresh off a whole bunch of events he did yesterday, convening young lawmakers in Arkansas. So maybe he'll share a little bit about that. But I'd love to just kick it off to both of you to introduce yourselves and share what brought you to this work. So Representative Iligan, maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you, Leila. Aloha. My name is Gregor Iligan, and I'm a state representative in Hawaii. I have the honor to represent the great people of Puna on Hawaii Island. And for those who don't know Hawaii Island, that district where I'm at is one historically known as one of the most underserved, under-resourced, and underdeveloped areas in the state. And I represent families with barriers to quality education, to reliable healthcare, and to economic stability. So when we're talking about that two-gen approach, and it was mentioned, our Hawaii adaptation of it is Ohana Nui. We strongly believe in it because most of the families in Hawaii are multi-generational families who have their kids, the parent, the grandparents, and many to a home. And trying to be able to address all the different challenges while living in a multi-generational family is what we're trying to do as a state. More about myself, I was born in the Philippines, migrated to Hawaii, and went to the military, was there for 6 years. I also became a council member at 26 years old and the youngest in Hawaii Island. And then I went to the House, climbed up the ranks to be the vice speaker. And now I am no longer in leadership, but chairing one of the committees that I really wanted to chair, which is economic development and technology. We really need economic development for healthy families, and economic stability to me is one of the foundation to get families out of poverty. So that's a little bit about myself, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share.
Well, thank you for having me today, and I'll be quick about introducing myself. I'm Representative Aaron Pilkington. I represent District 45 here in Arkansas. I just got elected to my 5th term. So I first got elected when I was 26, and now I'm 34. So it's been a while. It's actually funny. We were looking, me and my wife, through some photos, and first time I got sworn in, I had no wife. Then the second time I got sworn, I had a wife. The third time I got sworn, I had a baby. And then this time I've got 3 children with me. So you can literally, through swearing in photos, see the progression of my life. And but it's great. I mean, I've had a couple of people come up to me and just say the vibe shift in your chamber has been insane, because when I first got there, there was maybe one kid down on the hall swearing in. And this time it looked like a preschool. I mean, there were kids running around nonstop. There's a great photo of Representative Gravlick, who's one of the new fellows. His daughter literally fell asleep on him during the swearing in. It's a very cute photo. So it's been great. It's great to do this work. What brought me to it, not only kind of this work with families, but just the Future Caucus as well, is just it's ideas not a lot of people are talking about. I mean, the reality is, I'm always interested in kind of working on things I think that are a problem, but also it just seems, a lot of the traditional think tanks aren't really going into this. And I think for a long time, we've kind of let families and children and maternal health take the back burner. And now we're seeing the consequences in our society and seeing things go down, like our birth rates and things like that. And so I was part of the Delta Regional Authority Fellowship last year, the DRA. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but it's a great program. And so obviously I'm going through all these communities, and I'm just seeing these, in many ways too, that these are areas they do not vote for Republicans. Let me put it that way. And a lot of Republicans don't really go to those areas either. And so it was interesting though to get that perspective and gain that, and how have that has kind of helped transform my thinking and how that we can better address some of these really underserved, underdeveloped communities. So that's kind of all over the place. But I've got a background in healthcare. I've always wanted to really do right by maternal health, and especially too, we're the #1 most pro-life state in the nation, but yet we have the worst maternal health outcomes, and that is a problem. And that to me is showing that we're not truly living up to the promise that we make to our voters when we slap on our mailers that we're pro-life. And so, as a Catholic, I tell everyone, like, womb to tomb. And so That's what I live by. And so, as we've gone on and done, that debate has shifted in Arkansas, and obviously, we have an abortion ban here in Arkansas. I remind my colleagues that the fight is not over, and that we need to continue to actually be pro-life, like we say we are, and make life better for families and mothers and newborns. So that is part of it. And so, which is it's interesting because by doing that, I've also been able to build bipartisan coalitions with Democrats who say we may not agree on this issue, but we can agree on these policies to help new families, to help new mothers, to help get more access to prenatal care. And so that's actually been really great because it's like, um, when we are able to maybe put that in that issue, we're still going to debate. We're not going to not talk about it, but maybe if we can just put it to the side for a day or two and we can talk about these other issues, we can actually work together and see that we've got some common ground. And we're both trying to get Arkansas to a better place than where it currently is. And the Future Caucus has been great to be kind of a vehicle for that. And the as Layla said, I was one of the founding members of the maternal health fellowship, and it was great to hear some different perspectives, and of course too, actually, some of these we talked to and they said actually Arkansas is doing pretty good in this category. So it was nice to actually get some good information here and there. But it just I mean, I tell all my members all the time, like, you've got to start getting more involved in this because you've got to get this different perspective, because sometimes we're so myopic. It impedes our ability to be effective lawmakers. And reality is, like, we can get some really big wins if we actually sometimes just take off our own self-imposed blinders. So,
All right. I so appreciate all of those comments starting it. And the part where just the starting place of what are the sharing of the experiences and your journey, like, and for all of us that have shaped us from our earliest years, that continue to shape us, I think is something that's so often, like, informal leadership or positional power, that's such a driver, because our experiences, our identities, our beliefs and our values are always with us. And being in an awareness of that, both from ways to think about how can we find new ways to connect or understand or be curious with one another, but also, as many of you raised, to check our own confirmation bias, blinders, or perspectives, but really also with that mutual respect. And so the part where we're thinking a lot about in this conversation, so I mean, what can happen at the state level and community level in terms of innovation? And, like, I'm a huge passionate person about state innovation and policy. It's where decisions make a real difference. Budget decisions make a difference. You can track accountability, see leadership, and be more proximate. And so just when we think about the dialogue and the reality where the polarization is real, yet are we arguing about 3% of the population voting wise that made the decision at the for the presidential election? I think we need to dream bigger and think bigger. This isn't a 3% conversation. This is about our future of intergenerational well-being for our families and economic mobility. And so balcony level, when we look at all the state, like state legislatures, House and Senate, 50% are Republican controlled, 40% Democrat controlled, 23 Democratic governors, 27 Republicans. Interesting, both of you come from trifecta states where Aloha State of Hawaii, that is a Democratic state. Arkansas is a trifecta of Republican. And so just an interesting part here. And I know, Layla,
yeah.
you see it across the country in a multitude of ways, but I would be curious for each of you to share maybe what was a meaningful moment or experience you had where your leadership changed, went to a next level in terms of serving within four families, and as well going forward in this political climate, how you think about leading inclusively, working with others, with that radical humility, but also really deep service. And so how you've done that, how you're thinking about doing it, both with your own experiences and, what you call out for the country. So I will, why don't we start with Representative Ilana, Illigan from Hawaii first, and go to Arkansas, and then Layla, bring your insights in if that would be okay.
Thank you, Annie. Well, first of all, you hit it in the nail. It's we need some real talk about these different values that we have. Um, I'm pro-choice, and we differ in values as a party. However, we have some shared values that we can work together on, and that's families. We both care about the mothers in a family dynamic, and we want to make sure that we take care of the parents of the children of our future. And that really opened my eyes in Future Caucus because when it comes to collaboration, Future helped me really think about and constantly be aware that we're working together with our different parties due to the fact that our community also have Republicans and Democrats. I'm a Democrat, but I also represent Republicans in my community. Just because they didn't vote for me, I still represent them. They may have different values, but there are shared values that we can focus on and work on that. And maternal health is one of those concerns that I had. And Future Caucus really opened my eyes that we are doing an outstanding job with our maternity death rate. Even though each death is very concerning, we would like to have no death during a birthing time, but to have 15 deaths with 100,000 births in Hawaii and having that low rate in maternity death is really great for us as a state. But there's more things we can do to support these families and make sure that it goes beyond that process. And we're talking about pre-K and making sure that we provide the necessary education during the time where 85% of a child's development of their brain is from 0 to 5. So we ensure that we set up these infrastructures. I know our Lieutenant Governor is taking a strong lead in that and working with her to have all these pre-K infrastructure in place so we have our future well educated and going into a great career in the future. So thank you for pointing that out early because right now we're witnessing the different values, but at the same time, there are shared values that's important to both of us, regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah, Rep. Pilkington, you want to go and then I'll close it out.
Yeah, sorry, I saw Anne was muted. I thought she said something, so I just didn't know she was going to say something. I didn't want to be rude. No, I think my colleague is 100% right in what he's saying. And you talk about inclusive leadership, and one of the things me and one of my co-chairs always talk about is sometimes using using you basically your colleague on the other side of the aisle to say this is a like conservative issue or maybe a liberal issue or it's important to one group or the other. How would you solve that issue? Um, and what's a liberal solution to a conservative problem or a conservative solution to a liberal problem? And because it's it kind of helps, like I said, get those blinders off and kind of make you think about different ways to do things. But it's also interesting too because we talk about it in a political sense, but there's also in a community sense. And so one of the things we can talk about maternal health and families. When I talk to some of our reps who serve these minority majority districts, we're saying, okay, why is the use of breast milk so much lower in these communities than other communities? Why is that? We're pushing this, and it's taking up really well in these white communities, but it's not taking up well in these African American communities. What's going on here? And having that conversation and having an open dialogue where they can say, well, Aaron, actually, the reason why is in their mind. This was a really fascinating conversation I had a couple of years ago. They said, when we went and I talked to my constituents about this issue, the midwives and the doulas will say, well, a lot of women think formula given to your child is a sign that you're poor, or no, breastfeeding is a sign that you're poor. So they would rather give them formula, which means that they're doing well. And I'm like, well, it's funny because you have all these like rich white ladies in Bentonville, Arkansas, driving around in Escalades, all breastfeeding their kid, and because that's like the best thing to do, and like they would look down on you if you weren't breastfeeding your kid. And so what a funny thing. Like they view that, as a better way. And we can we don't need to get in the debate of formula versus breast milk, and that's a weird thing to talk about. But I founded the breast milk bank here in Arkansas, so I talk about it a lot, weirdly enough. But it's just you don't I would have never thought that perspective going in, that is why they prefer formula over breastfeeding. And obviously there's a lot of health benefits to breastfeeding for the mother that no one seemed to be talking about. And so what was really interesting was, okay, so if we want to see an uptick in this, we need to address that maybe societal concern about, well, I don't want to be seen as, destitute. I am doing okay, and so that's why I want to give my kid formula. And the reality is like that doesn't mean that. And actually, you're able to help yourself. So that's a very small microcosm, though, of like when you have those dialogues and you kind of allow someone else to lead you, and not I don't know the answers about this, but it's good for me to bring other people in. And we're in a trifecta state, and people all the time ask me like, "Well, you're a Republican in the majority. Why do you even talk to Democrats? You don't need them. I mean, you literally like we could every single committee has a supermajority on it. We don't need a single one of their votes." And I tell people all the time, well, the reality is like they still have good ideas too. I mean that's and they're going to say something that just you completely forget about. But also too is they're representing a group of people that even in a state that is so dominated by one side, they're still willing to say, nope, this is my team and this is what I believe in and this is what I want. And so if you're even going to try to reach those groups, you have to engage with their representatives and listen to their ideas and how maybe they feel differently about things. And I would say too, as that kind of goes on, then it does become way more collaborative because then you start building that trust. And I would even say this too. I've had issues with our Minority Health Commission, and I've told them before, honestly, it's not a great look for me who represents a River Valley district that's completely on the other side of the state from the Delta, wagging my finger about them not providing the results we want to say. But you told me they're not providing the results. I will get my Republicans to back you up if you want to go and reform and change how that is, because we know it's a problem. But I need you to lead on that. And the trust is there to go. We trust them. They're going to back us up so that we have the votes to make those changes needed, because we also feel that we're not seeing the results we want to see out of that. And that's, that's huge, because I think in a lot of places you can't actually do that because there isn't that trust of, well, you're just going to might turn around on us or might get this program that we like because we know it's for us, but we do understand there's issues, but we can't make real effective change unless you come along with us. And once again, very highly specific example, but I'm just trying to show you and show everyone here that, by having those conversations and building that trust and kind of being inclusive in how we collaborate on policy, that you can actually really move the needle to the point you made, Anne, about so much on the state level. It's so impactful what we do. You can really move the needle. And I tell people all the time, and I think my colleague would agree, we're from small states, so you can actually move the needle pretty rapidly because it's not a lot of people are talking about. And so it's just, but it's the choice. If you want to get things done, it's actually way easier if you bring even some of the people who would be considered maybe your loyal opposition along with you. Because then, of course, too, you also have buy-in from the communities they represent. Or if they've got their representative saying, actually, we agree with this program. This isn't a program that we got told to do. We were part of the discussion and the collaboration to create the program. There's way more buy-in than one of, these guys from this different side of the state told us that this is what we have to do. And you know what, they think they know our lives better. In reality, we don't. So, but it also doesn't mean we can't learn. And there's on that side too. It's like, don't think just because I'm a rich white boy from the River Valley that I can't learn and appreciate and have empathy for what, a poor single Black African-American mother is going for in the Delta. So.
The only thing I'll add to those answers, which was great, is zooming out on the national level. I think what we've observed is there tends to be this false perception of what it means to find consensus or find or collaborate with other people. And it doesn't mean that you agree on everything. In fact, like it's actually really good when you can get people who like will fight tooth and nail for something that they really believe in and still can look at all of the other things that communities need and find ways to move forward despite those like really deep differences. That's what a democracy is. It's supposed to include people who have really, really different perspectives. And so I think what's important about what the representatives have mentioned is what they're doing is a culture shift inside the institutions where in a moment in time where there are shrinking spaces to even engage like respectfully with people who you really disagree with on things, to cultivate that permission structure even in a trifecta, right, state, to still hold those spaces in a time where those spaces are quickly disappearing. That's the thing that matters. So that's the first thing I'll say. And then the second thing is, as we've traveled around the country, there are things that then come up again and again and again that we hear from members all over the place. You know, I love the visual of like the Arkansas State House as a preschool, with just sort of, you know, like little kiddos running around, because it speaks to sort of who are the people who are holding these elected positions and what are their life experiences and how might that inspire them to really prioritize other issues. And we've heard about this issue of childcare from basically every state that we visited, whether it's a trifecta Democrat, trifecta Republican, a purple state. And so what that then tells us is, wow, how might we bring people together who, you know, perhaps you're a Republican in Maryland who wants to talk with a Democrat from, you know, a more conservative state, and hear like, what are some of the things that got through, or how are some of the ways that you're thinking about these issues? Because the political dynamics maybe are different in your states, even if you're in different parties. Those political dynamics actually give you a way to connect with one another, and you wouldn't have those spaces or those ways to connect if not for things like this. So I think it's just been really special to have the commitment from these leaders who want to open up not just their own ability to learn new ideas and stay open-minded, but to actually protect that muscle memory for their colleagues inside the institution and for future leaders that come behind them.
Oh my gosh. I love this conversation so much in terms of shared values and seeking those shared values. And literally, this is something that keeps all of us up at night at the Aspen Institute, is our diversity is our strength. We only go forward if we're going forward together. No leader can do anything of significance, meaning or lasting on their own, or even any sector, any part of society. And yet, how are we creating those conditions, Layla, just where you picked off or ended, that are creating and inviting that in? And, you know, the stories from Arkansas and, you know, Representative Pilkington, your thoughts about like just your journey also as a father and the humanity, I can still learn. Those parts about winning, holding positions of like formal or informal leadership, but how we sort of are creating those conditions, whether it's within the State House, the office, when or how we hold town halls, which I know, you know, Gregor, you just completed a round robin of like 12 of those, but literally making democracy, we're inviting families in through democracy, but then also changing how we think about hospitals, early childhood, like practical things like community colleges or workforce centers that can allow a mom, a dad, a grandparent to also come in and be a great parent while they're pursuing their learning and job, while also their children, and like these small pragmatic shifts from how are we, you know, creating things that allow it easier for breast milk, lactation, supports, access to mental health. So the part that I know my colleague Sarah Haight is monitoring the chat, and I think we probably have a fair amount of great questions coming in. And so as Sarah, I'm going to give the car keys to her in a second, but the part that I'd love to make sure that we leave time for, especially from our state elected leaders, and Layla, is to share like what's like one of your big leadership takeaways when you think about where we are and going forward, and also one of your big sort of big or small solutions that you're really excited to kind of push forward in this new world that's going to make the greatest difference for leading with and for families in your state. And so I'm putting that there for a little closing heads up, but I'm going to turn now to Sarah to share some of the questions from our colleagues in the group chat.
Thanks, Anne. And I know that Representative Illigan has to leave a few minutes early to get back into session. So I want to kick off with you. So one of the questions in the chat from Lisa is in regards to research from economist Melissa Kearney. And she indicated in a book last year that the families being most impacted by lack of economic mobility are led by women and men who have not completed post-secondary degrees or credentials. So what do we think the best policies, programs, and changes look like in your community and state that could support young parents who are really seeking to create intergenerational opportunity in their family?
Of course. So just to share, I actually went to the military as my big break into my first career. And I still feel to this day that there's not enough opportunities for young families in Hawaii Island. We're a very rural area, and so the opportunities are very limited. So what I'm trying to do is create more diverse economies in Hawaii Island to be able to provide that kind of opportunities for young families. And I do have three priorities this legislative session to be able to tackle some of those challenges with our economy. The first one is to be able to cut some of the red tapes that permitting is causing for small businesses who have very limited resources and can't afford these delays. That will help spur some of the economic development that's needed in the commercial area. Second, we really need to have more entrepreneurs. We need to have those individuals who want to take the risk to start a new business because they're actually tackling some of the challenges a community have. And they're addressing that in a business standpoint. And having more entrepreneurs will provide more of that opportunities for jobs and hopefully quality employment in the future. And third, Hawaii is right in the middle of the Pacific, and we need to figure out how to draw money from Arkansas. Those who want to be wanting to do business in a more tropical climate and wants to put less layers in the winter. And I want to encourage those entrepreneurs to come in Hawaii and do business and invest more in Hawaii. We can also do more in the foreign direct investment with FDIs from Japan to Peru, all the way to Greece, to Norway, wherever they may be. It would be great that they can see Hawaii as a place to do business, and maybe they could use that as an entry point to start doing business in the other states as well. So these kind of opportunities will help not only economic development, but provide more opportunities for families when they're seeking that role. And having an opportunity into the trades is a career as well. I want to encourage others to say that seeking higher education may not be the only opportunities. There are a good paying job in being an electrician, being a carpenter, doing the hands-on labor that's necessary to make an economy work. So that's what I would say to figuring out how to provide more opportunities for young people.
Thank you so much, Representative, and for highlighting the importance of thinking more expansively about what we mean by post-secondary education for young families. Representative Pilkington, I'd love to go to you with that question, really thinking about policies, programs, and changes to support young parents. And then Anne and Layla would welcome your responses before Anne, you close us out.
Sure. One of the things that we're actually currently working on is it's called Access Arkansas. It's about a one form that everyone can apply to any state institution with one form. So they're not having to do multiple deposits, multiple things. So it cheapens the cost to apply for community college, four-year college, everything. And then we've also talked about that for certificate programs as well. And then of course, freeing up, a lot of scholarship legislation that was done 20 years ago or 10 years ago, a lot of it was just for the four-year institutions. And so it wasn't for our just 2 years, and it wasn't for certificates or trade schools or VOTEC schools. And so we worked a lot to kind of add that to it, because we also understand, sometimes it's not, it looks like a four-year degree for that family to kind of pull themselves up. It's the 2-year degree that, maybe they go and then they later on becomes four. And especially, like I always like nursing is a great example. You can start out as just being a CNA, then be an MA, then an LPN, then an R, all the way to an APRN. And it's amazing to watch a lot of women who grow their career along with just growing their family and their life in general. And so they move up that ladder and just making sure that education's easier and accessible for them. So that's a way I think that we can use, education to kind of help these young families grow. We make it more accessible. We make it to where more scholarships are able to be used at other institutions as well, not just a four-year program, a VOTEC school or things like that. So those have been some of the policies we've done to kind of in our way help them to achieve more and to get a policy. But one of the things too, we talk about workforce as being an issue, and I'll wrap it back to like childcare, which we've touched on a little bit here, is there's been a shift too with, as I've talked about maternal health and talked about kids and prenatal care and post, I lost the word. Anyways, post birth is hey, you want to retain these workers, you want to make it easier on them to choose you as an employer. You've got to be in the childcare game. And we've actually had some industries in here take the initiative and partner with local churches or other groups to create childcare centers. Or with nonprofits to do that. And what they've realized is, if I actually need a workforce, especially this younger workforce, I need to invest in that. And there's a group called Make My Move. It's a company. I went and they came to Arkansas because they have a few cities they work with, and they try to get people with remote workers to move to states through incentive packages. And they said the best incentive they ever gave out was, there was a town, I think it was like a town like 5,000 people, super small. But the incentive was they would give out free childcare, and I think they got 10,000 applications. So, almost, just an insane amount of people, but like, they're like, wow, people really care about this. And when I tell that story to our chamber and our industry leaders, they go, yeah, we just hear more and more about it. And it's good because they're starting to think about it. Some of these, older generational people who, maybe childcare was an issue for them, but they figured it out and got over it, but haven't realized how things have changed. And now they're suddenly see, if I want to make sure that I have a workforce for the future, I've got to make sure that I'm offering childcare. Because if the person who does offer childcare, they're the ones who's going to ultimately get the workers. And now, whether that be with themselves or through partnerships or whatever, it has to be a part of the equation, because you will have he'll essentially have people try to go, I need to go to a place or a community where there is more childcare options. So I want to kind of clarify my statement, not that the business necessarily need to do it, but they need to be part of the discussion with the community of how can we help support you. And so is that, a good example, I'll put it like Clarksville. I've got a Walmart distribution plant. I've got 2 Tyson hatcheries. I've got large businesses in this area. And they would say, none of them want to own a childcare center. But how do we get our whole community together, especially these larger companies, to say, we can offer something and make sure that we have a robust workforce? Because, happy families make happy communities, and happy communities are the ones that will grow and develop economically. So, so I just think I'm kind of veered off into 2 areas on you, but those are just 2 kind of points I wanted to hit on.
Yeah. And I'll just close this out. First, I know Rep. Iligan had to go vote, so he literally had session. I think the time difference with Hawaii is always very tricky. So grateful for him for being a part of this. And I'll just say, looking forward, the purpose of the Innovation Lab and the Innovation Fellows is to convene these kinds of conversations among lawmakers to identify what are some of the specific ideas that can be implemented or discussed in their states in order to tackle this issue, this question of how do we ensure the well-being of children and families. how do we tackle that in an innovative and collaborative way? And so at the end of this year, we'll have produced, thanks to the work of leaders like Rep. Pilkington and Rep. Iligan, as part of this working group, a set of recommendations and ideas just based on sort of their own experience in the legislature, as well as working with policy partners who can help us learn about some of those solutions. And so I do invite anybody who's listening to reach out to me or visit our website, futurecaucus.org, and you can also see some of that polling data that I mentioned earlier as well.
Oh my gosh, thanks everyone for the conversation. And we're only just getting started, and you can expect more to come from some of the follow-up, and we'll do our best to get back to respond to also all of the questions that we weren't able to get to. But this part that closing out on just kind of like some of the takeaways. Literally, we couldn't get a stronger invitation to step into leading with radical shared purpose, passion, humility, and also with service and in relationship. And this inside-outside approach is both about inside those beliefs, experiences, values that guide and shape all of us, that also our systems are comprised of people and individuals, but also that outside and that inside-outside of power, structures. But if we can bring down those silos, bring down the walls to really focus on the opportunities and the problems we're trying to solve together with curiosity, compassion, courage, and conviction, the sky is the limit. And it's not Pollyanna, but we have a lot of the solutions to the questions we've raised here, from pragmatic class schedules in community colleges, so a single mother can go and do these 3 classes in a row that will align to a higher paying job while there's high quality care and childcare there. Simple solution, doesn't have to cost that much. 2, what are different ways we can think about healthcare and policy? And so I really encourage us, and this is something for Ascend when we think about the 600 network partners that are embracing a 2-generation approach in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, DC, and going global. How we look at partnering with the governors, the leaders in state elected office and the legislatures, and then in communities and philanthropy, to really honor lived experience, to really engage the families so that we're leading with and alongside and for them, and also realize it's all our families, all of our communities, all of our children, all of our country. And so I just think this has been, I thank everybody for their leadership every day. Representative Pinkleton, and Illigan and Leila Zidane from Future Caucus. The Institute and Ascend are actively ready to say, let's put our power, our possibility, and put that forward for new ways that can ensure every child, every family, every parent, every community can thrive, because that's the moral imperative, it's the economic one, but also it's what will fill up our hearts and souls, and that's what we need, and also build that power. So thank you all for coming. I hope you'll join us in February for our 3rd conversation on the new order and the power of trust with Alan Burson-Lacheur from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, to also think about trust with philanthropy, with community and policy. So thank you all. Have a great day.